right, welcome to the second episode of Appeals Court. My name is Jay.
I'm Zach.
And I'm John.
And today we're going to have John trying to sell the wonderful 101 for the Wii U to Zach.
Yes.
So I will be acting as the judge today.
And I make no promises, but I will do my best.
Okay. And I will try to keep an open mind.
So this is my first time on Appeals Court. So Jay, or should I call you Your Honor?
Call me Your Honor, actually.
Your Honor? Okay. What have I done? This was a terrible mistake. Okay. So I'll just go ahead and jump into my opening statement then, for lack of a better term.
All right, that works with me.
Excellent. All right. Thank you, Your Honor. So Zach, right off the bat, are you a fan of Nintendo franchises?
I am.
Interesting, because not a lot of people know this, but the Wonderful 101 was originally pitched as a Nintendo franchise crossover title, and combining characters like Mario and Samus Aran, and Luigi and Donkey Kong and Peach with characters that you find in other video games. So basically, almost like a Smash Brothers concept, and kind of the leftovers of that, even though obviously it didn't happen. You can see them in the actual final design of the game. Like, the game itself features over 100 playable characters, right? And they're all superheroes. And the cast of all these playable characters, a lot of them, you can link them back to some of Nintendo's biggest franchises. For example, Wonder Red, who's kind of like, the lead character of the game. He's red. He can break bricks, and he can shoot fireballs. Remind you of anybody?
Sounds familiar.
Exactly. So a lot of that connective tissue remains in the game itself. But honestly, I think it's great that the Wonderful 101 kind of became its own thing. There's a lot there that will appeal to fans of Nintendo franchises, but there's really nothing else on the market like this game, in my opinion. If you're familiar with other Kamiya titles like Okami, Devil May Cry. This is something that's going to be immediately familiar to you, but at the same time, wholly different than anything you've ever played. So like I said earlier, you control over 100 characters. They go around different locations. You fight aliens and robots. I mean, it's a superhero game. There were a lot of comparisons when the game came out to Pikmin, which I think don't really do the game a whole lot of justice. Because instead of just controlling one character at a time, all your characters in the Wonderful 101, they act as one, basically.
Interesting.
Right? And all your characters have the ability, combined to turn into like, guns, whips, bricks, giant weights that can drop on enemies, swords, and all kinds of weapons. There's other characters in the game, like not just like, Wonder Red and Wonder Blue and Wonder Pink and Wonder Green and Wonder Yellow, but you've also got characters like Wonder Sister, Wonder Santa, Wonder Toilet.
And Wonder Saki.
Wonder Saki's the best character. He's actually a DLC character. It's a superhero Kamiya game. It's pretty much all top-down, isometric style. There's a lot of Beautiful Joe in there, I think, as well. Here's the other thing about the Wonderful 101, right? It's almost kind of like, in a weird way, either like a Disney. You remember the Disney? What were they called? It was like the Amiibo.
Infinity.
Infinity, right? Like in the sense that it's one big kind of like toy chest. You can pull different toys out and play with them. Jay, at what point do I stop and let Zach kind of take over? And
you can, what? Let's stop now. Actually, Your Honor is stopping your open statement, and he's allowed the other party to,
Yeah. I'll make my case, or maybe help you pitch to me a little bit, John.
Okay.
Excellent. So some of my biggest reserves with what I've seen of the Wonderful 101 really stems from did I pronounce it wrong?
It's a Wonderful 101.
What did I say?
You said the Wonderful 101. It's just a much longer way to say it.
101 Dalmatians. I see. But so no, my biggest reserve is that it looks very intense. I've seen some trailers for it. In fact, I bought a Wii U pretty close to launch, shortly after Breath of the Wild was announced. I was anticipating it pretty early, and I almost picked this game up, but it looked really, really overwhelming to play. There's always a lot going on the screen, and that was kind of my main thing that kind of held me back. But my other concern was that I have experience with a lot of Japanese-made games that aren't by Nintendo that tend to be very long experiences. And as I've gotten older, I've kind of gotten to a point where I'm less interested in 20-hour games, and I'm more interested in 10-hour games. So I had some fears about this being too long. And the other thing is that I just haven't played a Platinum game yet that I have found particularly inspiring. I've played, I think, a handful of them, but nothing that's really stuck.
So I would counter that.
So I'm hoping that you can address some of those concerns.
I can actually. So right off the bat, I would counter your last point about not ever being hooked by any Platinum games in the past. I would tell you that this is unlike any Platinum game you've ever played.
Okay.
Which, most Platinum games, what do you think of when you think of a Platinum game, right? You think of something like, something like, what's a really good example? Bayonetta. Bayonetta is a really good example. Beautiful Joe is a really good example. Something like that. But with the Wonderful 101, it's much closer to like a what's the best? It's almost like a strategy game, but with a really, really deep combat system, right? Like the gameplay itself, you use offensive and defensive moves against the right enemies at the right time. And you have to balance the amount of power meter that you have left. So basically, for example, if you wait to block an enemy attack, and remember, all your characters are acting as one, right? So if you wait to block an enemy attack by forming like a giant, I don't know, rubber ball or like a wall made of jello or something, it'll bounce against the wall, it'll leave them stunned, and you could use that opportunity to open up with a big, like a huge multi-part combo. It's very similar to Beautiful Joe, but instead of focusing on balancing meter with slow motion, it's balancing meter with multiple melee attacks and like bombs and projectiles and all different kinds of stuff, right? I won't lie to you. It does get intense at times. It's the game. It's very demanding of your attention. It demands that you're there. It's not one of those games where you can look away to social media for a minute, or if somebody's calling your name, you look at there, hey, yeah, what's up? This is a game that you have to have both feet in the water.
Okay.
In order to keep yourself from drowning, if that makes any sense. But yeah, and as for length, I mean, it's maybe a little bit longer than your typical Platinum game or Platinum Games output, which means you're probably looking at a 10 to 12 hour experience, if that.
Okay.
So it's not like a 40-50 hour experience by any stretch of the imagination.
Good. Okay. One other thing that I forgot to mention, but it's pretty important to me, is I typically find Kamiya's attitude on Twitter to be kind of off-putting, pretty intense. How much does that kind of edgy attitude come through in the product itself?
To a certain degree, that is something that's present.
Okay.
It's so the game is rated T. There's a lot of violent content. There's a lot. It's for as colorful as the game looks and presents itself. There are some rather dark themes of death. There's also a lot of ass shots all over the place.
Oh.
So it's definitely a Kamiya experience. So take that as you will. Like it's and a lot of it does come off as gratuitous. But then again, if you've played Bayonetta, then I mean that's as far as a level of gratuity goes. I mean that's what you should expect.
Okay.
It's nothing that's going to make you feel uncomfortable or embarrassed to play or anything. But at the same time, given the colorful nature of the game, and the fact that it does look like a superhero cartoon, like it can come across as jarring at first. You know what I mean?
Okay, I'll keep that in mind.
All right, cool. So, since we have both open statements from both parties, John, I am going to let you tackle your first selling point.
Okay, so as far as selling points for the game go, what's the best way to? So, Zach, do you like games where you are? I'm trying to think of the best way to put this. Do you like games where you are drip fed a steady stream of rewards? Yes or no?
Do you mean like loot, kind of like loot and kind of gear upgrades type of thing?
No, I'm more talking about like play style.
Yeah, but I'm not interested in like a 5-hour tutorial section. if that answers your question.
Okay, so what I will tell you is that this game, it's like you said, it can be a little overwhelming, especially since the pace of combat can get kind of blistering at times. But if you keep going, if you stick with it, there's a lot of reward to be found here. Like, there's a lot of depth, a lot of flexibility. There's all sorts of different play styles that you can adapt yourself to. The game, I feel, does a really good job of kind of slowly handing you new ways of playing, new moves, and new abilities. If you like to play defensively, you have plenty of techniques you can use before picking up more offensive abilities. And if you're more forward, if you'd rather just get in there and mix it up, you can pick up just a whole bunch of devastating stuff that will basically keep you on the front foot, for lack of a better term. The game rewards experimentation, and you can actually recruit citizens. And that's something that I just happened to stumble upon. Yeah.
I've got a quick question for you, and it's just so I can better understand some of the mechanics as you've been talking about. You've kind of talked about how you can make a shield or you can make a wall. How do these sort of... I assume this is a Gundam style, they piece together type of thing? How do you form these items?
Sort of. You basically, like, it's trying to find the best way to you just kind of, everybody just kind of melds together. You know what I mean?
I see, but how do I pick items? Is it using the touch screen?
No. So, I haven't played this game in like 4 years now. If I remember correctly, you can. So yes, you can, but you don't need. So, like, the gamepad isn't necessary for Wonderful 101. You don't need to use the gamepad.
Okay.
I hate to interrupt. I thought the gamepad was necessary because I thought there's like sections where you like enter houses or buildings and like.
I don't remember the gamepad being necessary, but again, remember, I have not played the game in 4 years. So I could be I could be remembering that incorrectly, but I don't remember the gamepad being necessary. But if I
okay.
Yeah, if I turn out to be incorrect on that, that's on me. So I what I do remember is that you can use the gamepad to kind of trace shapes for different attacks. You can draw multiple attacks of different kinds. You can sweep an enemy in the air with a sword before, like, just shooting it with bullets and hitting it back down with with a blow from a hammer. So in that regard, yeah, you can use the gamepad. If I remember correctly, though, you can do that exact same stuff just by waggling the the Joy-Con, or not the Joy-Cons, Jesus, the thumbstick on the Wii U Pro controller or whatever it was. But again, I digress.
Okay, how complicated are the controls, generally speaking?
That's the part that can get a little. It can get a little overwhelming. You need to have. And there are people who got a little overwhelmed by the different controls in the game. It's sort of like playing a halfway complex, action game, or actually, a better way would be like a fighting game, right? Like, you've got to have some level of skill needed to pull off different, controller movements and combinations. But after a while, everything just kind of becomes second nature. Like how eventually, okay, well, if I do a half circle and I hit B, Ryu is going to throw a Hadouken. It's kind of, and then then you just kind of remember those muscle movements, and everything becomes second nature at some point. But it does take a little bit to actually kind of catch on.
Easy to play, tough to master type of situation.
Yeah, that's a really good way to put it, actually.
Okay, I'll keep that in mind. Okay.
And you know what? So that's where I'll end my first selling point, because I want to get into story separately.
All right. Zach, what do you think about John's first selling point?
I think his first selling point was pretty strong. He does make it seem like it's a pretty approachable game. My only concern, of course, would be dusting off the gamepad and then using it. I found with some games, I think Kirby was maybe one of the worst offenders. I found that looking at the touchscreen and drawing something while also looking up at my TV and playing was kind of jarring, and so I wish he was a little bit firmer on some of the gamepad rules, but overall, he's made it seem a little bit more approachable than I thought it might be.
All right. As the judge, or otherwise your honor, I am going to... For the selling point, I believe it's in John's favor. As Zach has mentioned, we weren't really too sure on the gamepad mechanics or the requirements, but besides that, it seems like John was able to sell Zach on the gameplay nonetheless.
Sure thing. So are we ready to move on?
Yeah, we can move on to John's second selling point. So, John, whenever you're ready, just go ahead and start.
Okay, so I'll go ahead and I'll ask Zach. Zach, how important is story and narrative to you in a game? Do you like something that is serious in tone and with dark, mature themes, or do you like something that is silly and lighthearted, or do you prefer something that is kind of a happy mix of both?
So here's the thing. I don't mind light tone, but the one thing I want is if it is going to commit to a story, I'm actually willing to put gameplay aside. I'm one of those people who has gotten to a point where story is above game. A game can elevate story. Um, all I want is for it to commit to the story. I don't need it to be silly. I don't need it to be serious. I just want to hear that the story there is good.
Okay, so the story in Wonderful 101 is interesting and fun. It's also completely ridiculous. The story begins with a school bus full of kids being attacked by aliens, and the aliens are called the Geth Jerk. Which, hey, Kamiya, I have no idea. But their teacher, I can't remember his name offhand, but their teacher is actually the main superhero, Wonder Red, and basically he teams up with other superheroes in the game to destroy the aliens. Done. You know, like there's and that's basically the game's tutorial, by the way, which is introducing the heroes and their Unite Morph ability, which kind of forms the crux of the gameplay. And then you go from there. And there are actually some interesting spoilers and some interesting story twists that I won't, just in case you do end up playing it, I won't spoil for you. But there's a lot. It's goofy, and there's a lot. And again, there's a lot of gratuitous kind of stuff happening because it is Kamiya. But there's a lot of personality in the story as well, and you can tell as you're playing through it that Kamiya was really, really, really. He had a vision, and there was a story that he wanted to tell. There was an experience that he wanted to impart onto the player, and in that regard, I think he did a really good job with that. There's a lot of drama that is really, really, really overstated in a good, fun, silly way. There are some bad jokes in the game. So again, that goes hand in hand with some of the more gratuitous stuff in the game. So be aware that that is there. The music in the game, the score is really loud. It's really fun, and it really does a good job of selling both the characters and some of the incredibly epic boss fights in the game. There are some super epic boss fights in this game, and honestly, like it was one of the forgotten gems of the Wii U. This game got a raw deal because it was locked onto a system that just was not very popular and did not sell well, was not played by the audience that it deserved. Which is why I hope it comes to the Nintendo Switch, as I know we have all heard the rumors is that Wonderful 101 is going to be remastered and released for the Nintendo Switch, and I desperately hope it is because it is unlike anything else that Kamiya has done. Which is why, again, Zach, I think this would be a great fit for you because as somebody who has played other platform games and found them just kind of rote, I think this would be something for you to pick up and play and say, okay, well, you know what? Kamiya and Platinum are capable of much more than just your standard, button mashy, gratuitous action affairs.
John, I would like to state that you said platform and not platinum at one point.
Okay, sorry.
No, you're fine. I wanted to call you out for it just because I'm the judge here.
That's fine. I think that's my second selling point.
Cool.
Okay. So my only quick response to that would be, I mean, you've made it sound a lot like a Saturday morning cartoon, and that actually makes it pretty appealing to me. Honestly, if things are going to be kind of cheesy and corny, I like when they know it. That's pretty good. Like you said, though, I am a little bit skeptical of some of the depictions of certain characters, certain jokes, some stuff that maybe is a bit of a trope with some Japanese-made games. But honestly, you've done a pretty good job selling me on the story. It seems like a lighthearted Saturday morning goof.
Yeah, just it is. Just bear in mind that again, the game is rated teen, so there is some, I guess the best term for it would be immature humor. But again, like I also don't want to undersell it, but I also don't want to overstate it. You know, like
Okay.
you're not, it's nothing that you're going to find in, for example, Bayonetta, where you've got, your climax attacks. You know what I mean? Or like I remember in Bayonetta there was an angel enemy called Joy that literally
Right.
the introduction of the enemy, she fell down on her ass and started masturbating, and I was like, whoa. There's nothing like that here. Like it's immature, like ass shots and stuff like that, but it's nothing like you're gonna see like in a Bayonetta game.
Okay. Okay. Cool. That sounds good. What you were describing about Bayonetta is kind of what made me bounce off of it a number of years ago. So, I'm glad to see things don't quite go off the rails like that.
Yeah, I think John easily was able to sell his point like perfectly. I know that Zach did mention that he's more into gaming stories for like the series, for being more serious than lighthearted. But I feel like with the Wonderful 101, like it is a lighthearted game. As Zach mentioned, it's supposed to be more like a Saturday morning cartoon than like a film you go see in theaters. And I believe that Zach picked up on that really fast. I feel like John was able to sell on that like perfectly. So once again, this is in John's favor. Sorry, Zach.
Hey man, I'm just looking for more games to play. I don't need anybody to apologize.
Yeah, I hope he does play this.
Well, in appeals court, I did go to the University of Saki to become your honor. So, sometimes I do have to apologize. um, okay, then. John, you've done a really good job so far with selling the game to Zach, but I do want you to sell him one more time on the Wonderful 101. So whenever you're ready, just go ahead and start.
Okay, so I've talked about gameplay, I've talked about story. I think what I'll do to kind of tie it all together is, let's talk about what happens when you tie both those elements together, right? So the game itself, and basically I'll summarize everything here in one package. So again, the game is a bunch of superheroes, 100 plus superheroes, from an isometric viewpoint. So you're looking down, right, and you've got your you can turn into different objects called unite morphs. That's the actual technical term that the game uses. And your job is to progress from stage to stage, recruit citizens for your army of superheroes. And the more characters you recruit, the more powerful your morph powers get. So you've got this battery meter, and when you use your morph forms, you can use them to defeat aliens, to get through puzzles, to get through traps, to find ways around different obstacles. You recharge the meter by doing normal attacks or picking up batteries that drop from different aliens. You also get O parts, which are basically like money, like coins or rings. You use those to buy upgrades, new Unite Morph stuff, and all kinds of different things. I believe that you. So now that I'm thinking about it, I think that you do have to use the gamepad, or the right analog stick. So I don't think you're locked to one or the other. So if you don't have a gamepad, you should still be able to play the game. It's kind of all kind of coming back to me now. For example, like if you are using the gamepad, if you want to use a gun, you just draw like, I don't know, a basic shape of a gun, right? Or if you want to use like a sword, you just draw a basic sword outline. If you want to use a whip, you just draw like a squiggly line. It's really intuitive. It's really fun. Again, it's nothing like Platinum has ever done before, and it's honestly nothing like what has come out of them since. To be honest with you, it almost made me disappointed in Platinum games that came after, simply because it showed me that there is a level of creativity there that they are simply not tapping into, because everybody knows Platinum games for their button mashy character, action platforming style stuff, right? But this is something that is so much more. There are the Unite morphs offer very interesting ways to overcome obstacles and defeat enemies, very inventive and fun ways to do this that you really can't find in another Platinum game. And I really wish that more of that creative output, or like I don't know, I wish that we would see more of that kind of creativity from Platinum right now, because they are capable of so much more than what they have done. And they make great games. I love Bayonetta. I love Devil May Cry. I loved Okami, but that too is a Kamiya game. But there is something about the Wonderful 101 that is just incredibly compelling to me, and I think it's because a great comparison would be, look at the Far Cry series and look what they did with Far Cry Primal, right? Like, at its core, it's still a Far Cry game, but they really took a risk and stepped outside of their comfort zone. There's no guns. There's no there's no mercenaries. No, you're a caveman and you're fighting other cavemen. That's the game, and it was something that was risky. It was something that nobody expected, and it ended up being, in my opinion, the best Far Cry game, or at least the most interesting, compelling Far Cry game. And Wonderful 101 is kind of the equivalent of that to me in a weird way, because it represents a developer taking what they know best and throwing that away and stepping outside of their comfort zone and trying something new. And I always respect and love when an established developer that finds themselves locked into a certain genre of game takes the effort to say, we are going to unlearn everything we have done, and we are going to go in a different direction and see what happens, even if the results don't always mesh together perfectly. And I'm not going to say that the Wonderful 101 is a perfect game. It's not a perfect game. It does have issues. It can get overwhelming. Some of the humor in the game, while not as in your face as something like Bayonetta, can be discerning to people given the cartoony, colorful nature of the game. Like, for example, if you were to pick up the game for your, the box art looks like something you would pick up for your 9-year-old, right? It absolutely does. But I would not let my 9-year-old play it, because there are jokes in there that are not appropriate for him. But the control scheme can get overwhelming, especially if you're not incredibly dexterous. But at the end of the day, the connective tissue that holds everything together is much stronger than all of its negative aspects. So I guess the game is a great example of something that is much bigger, much better than the sum of its parts. And that's what I have to say about the Wonderful 101.
Okay, cool.
Zach, since John has summed up all of his selling points into like one long comment for you, what are your feelings on the Wonderful 101?
Yeah, so my feelings about the Wonderful 101 are actually quite a bit warmer than I walked into this with, which is great. I think one of the things that probably seems most appealing to me is that John talks about this kind of being a one-off for Platinum. And so in some ways it's kind of a bummer, right? Because this talk has not turned me into a 100, a Platinum Games zealot. I'm not going to go out there and try all the Platinum Games now. But hearing that, like, some of the things that I don't like about things like Bayonetta aren't present here. And the combat sounds to be a little bit away from like that kind of button mashy thing that we've seen in some other Platinum games. It sounds like this is maybe the least Platinum of the Platinum games that I'm familiar with. I mean, look, I don't think this is going to be a game I'm going to play, and it's going to be one of my favorites of all time, but he made a pretty convincing case for dusting off the Wii U. I'm pretty tempted. It sounds pretty good.
I'll even get it for you.
Ooh, now you've really sweetened the pot. You don't have to do
that. I mean, you can find it super cheap now.
Oh, I'm sure.
All right, then. Well, I don't feel so bad for my final verdict then. I feel like John was able to sell the game, perfectly well. As Zach already mentioned, he came in here with some really mixed thoughts about the Wonderful 101 and Platinum Games, games in general. But I feel like John was able to sell him on the Wonderful 101 perfectly fine. And, Zach was like, you know what? This sounds really dope. So I'm going to say that John was able to accomplish his goal and that this case is closed. And we even had John offer to buy the game for Zach.
Yeah.
which is really a first for appeals court. I like it. I like this as a feature.
Yeah. We've only had 2 episodes, and someone's already offered to buy the game for the other person.
That is how confident I am that this is something that you will enjoy. It may not be your favorite game ever, but I think you're going to be pleasantly surprised.
Yeah, damn, man. I mean, I'm convinced. I mean, man, I'll speak for the judge. I think this game seems alright. I'm warm on it. Sounds alright.
All right. So does everyone here agree that this case is closed and that we can stop the session for today?
Agreed.
Yeah, man.
All right, cool. Well, you know what? That was the second episode of Appeals Court. John was able to sell Zach on the Wonderful 101, and Zach seems like he's interested in playing it. As always, I'm Jay.
I'm Zach.
And I'm John.
And this was Appeals Court.